As US-Iran tension reached a fever pitch, Gulf allies remain notably silent despite ongoing missile and drone attacks, choosing strategic neutrality and leaving Washington and Israel questioning their stance. Good day everyone and welcome back to our broadcast. I'm your host Awesome and you're watching The Global Observer. Our top story today explores the reason the Gulf continues avoiding the Iran war at all costs. While the headlines focus on the massive explosions and naval blockades, a much deeper and more permanent geopolitical calculation is being made in capitals like Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, and Kuwait City. One that patronizes the neighbors they must live with forever over the allies who might eventually leave. The scale of the aggression directed at the Gulf states since the war began is truly staggering. Over the weekend, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps made a chilling acknowledgment. While 40% of its firepower has been aimed at Israel, the remaining 60% has been forced on its Arab neighbors. More than 2,000 projectiles have been fired at the Gulf sovereign territory. Iran is not attacking these countries because it views them as primary enemies. Rather, it is using them as a pressure point. By battering the Gulf, Tehran hopes to drive a wedge between these nations and Washington, forcing Arab leaders to persuade President Donald Trump to step back from the brink of a full-scale invasion. This has placed regional leaders in an unenviable position. On one side, they face intense pressure from the United States. Senator Lindsey Graham, a close ally of President Trump, has been the most vocal in his criticism, questioning why the United States should defend partners like Saudi Arabia if they refuse to participate in what he calls a shared struggle. His warning was blunt: if they do not join, consequences will follow. On the other side, the Gulf states are looking at the map. They realize that while American forces are currently surged in the region, they have a history of backing up and leaving, much like they did in Afghanistan and Iraq. Iran, however, is a permanent neighbor. As one UAE official put it plainly to reporters, at the end of the day, you are neighbors. Even if it takes decades to rebuild the trust, they must eventually find a way to live beside Tehran long after the last American carrier strike group departs. There is also a growing sense of resentment towards how this escalation began. A deleted social media post from Dubai business tycoon Khalif Al Habtoum has offered a rare glimpse into the private sentiment of the Gulf elites. He noted that the region knows exactly who dragged them into this dangerous escalation without consulting the very people called allies. This highlights a significant barrier to entry, a deep-seated distrust of the current administration's motivation. Many regional analysts believe that by going to war, the United States prioritizes Israeli security at the expense of Arab stability. For the Gulf states, joining an offensive action feels like volunteering to be at the front line of a war they did not choose and cannot control. The economic risks of joining the fight are equally catastrophic. Saudi Arabia, the regional heavyweight, is particularly wary of being forced to fight on multiple fronts. If Riyadh enters the war, it risks reigniting its southern border conflict with the Iran-backed Houthi rebel in Yemen. While Saudi Arabia has a Red Sea coastline that theoretically bypasses the Strait of Hormuz, the route is highly vulnerable to Houthi drones and missiles. The Bab al-Mandab Strait, the narrow checkpoint linking the Red Sea to global markets, could be closed in an instant, effectively trapping Saudi exports and leaving Kingdom's Vision 2030 economic plans in ruins. Furthermore, we are seeing a terrifying new phase of infrastructure warfare that targets the very lifeblood of the desert, water. Over the weekend, a desalination plant on Iran's Quesh Island was struck, prompting an immediate Iranian retaliatory drone strike on a desalination facility in Bahrain. For countries that account for half of the world's desalination capacity, but less than 1% of its population, this is a nightmare scenario, my friends. The Gulf states are almost entirely dependent on these plants for survival. If the war expands to include water infrastructure, it won't just be an economic crisis, it will be a humanitarian disaster on a scale the war has never seen. This tit-for-tat targeting of civilian assets is a primary reason why nations like the UAE are moving so quickly to deny any involvement in offensive strikes, reiterating that their posture remains purely defensive. Is the Iranian strategy working? That's the question you might ask yourself. The data suggests it might be. Energy shipments through the Strait of Hormuz have nearly ground to a halt, keeping the fifth of the world's oil supply under constant threat. This, my friend, has triggered the biggest oil shock in history, sending fuel prices in the United States to record heights. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has even taken to social media to appeal directly to American voters, blaming surging gas prices and pummeled retirement accounts on Israel and its dupes in Washington. This economic pressure is hitting home. Qatar Energy recently halted production after attacks on its facilities, causing European gas prices to soar by 50%. If the conflict continues, experts warn that oil could reach $150 per barrel, a price that would devastate the global economy. In response to this pressure, some of Trump's Gulf allies are even reviewing their overseas investment pledges. The very same trillions of dollars in investments that the president recently touted as a major economic victory. The war is straining their domestic economies to the point where they can no longer afford to be the world's bank while their own infrastructure is being targeted. Yet, even with their economies under fire, the reluctance to go to war remains. They are waiting to see if there is a way to restore deterrence without triggering a total regional collapse. Some suggest they could support US operations by opening airspace, the least escalatory option. But, my friend, it even carries the risks of Iranian refinery for a refinery retaliation. Ultimately, the Gulf states are playing a long game. They are caught between a security guarantor that seems increasingly unpredictable and a powerful neighbor that is demonstrably aggressive. They are tired of being the theater for other people's war. As Professor Badr al-Saif of Kuwait University noted, this country feels they need to take matters into their own hands because they are the ones who will be left to pick up the pieces when the smoke clears. However, as the attacks continue, the risk of inaction grows. How long can you sit back and absorb missiles before you are forced to act? For now, the war of silence remains, but the pressure behind it is reaching a breaking point. Thank you for watching The Global Observer. I'm your host, Awesome, and watch out for more.